Welcome everybody to a Delco Nerd Network Hot Take. My name is Anthony Ragucci, and if you haven't seen a hot take before, well, it's where a few friends get in a basement, we give our thoughts, we give our opinions on a movie, a TV show, or a game. Today, it's going to be a game, and that game is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Here to discuss, as always, the Man in Black, Chris Trio.
I just did finger guns for those who can't see. Gooch.
Oh, like that Man in Black.
Yeah, that
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, but
There
you know
are
me.
no-
I have no touchdones for Final Fantasy, unfortunately. So
Yeah, there's some Men in Black in this.
Like Will Smith went in Men in Black, or
Like messed up people in black robes. People in black. You don't really want to be
not a good thing.
You'd be like, nah. I mean, maybe depends how you look at it. You're like a half Sephiroth, like slave.
I see.
Yeah, you just want to reunite with Sephiroth here.
I see.
This is
He
from
looks
the
gorgeous.
collector's edition.
Yeah.
But as if you could have heard, Trio has not played Rebirth. I have, and I'm here to deliver the verdict.
The review.
Yeah, I think this is like the first time like we've done a really big game with not the two of us having played it and just me. We were gonna look for a guest. Things kind of not fell apart, but it took me so fucking long to finish this game. I put 160 hours into this game.
Damn.
So it really took me a while, and I was talking to somebody behind the scenes, and essentially it just didn't work out, and we needed to get this done. I'm going away next week, and then we got other podcasts. So we're on 4 for 4 today.
We were gonna do 2 and 2, but since we had some rearrangements, we're like, let's just knock all 4. But here we are.
So let's talk about Final Fantasy Rebirth, the sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake. One of the best games of 2020. And Trio, you know what it's like following up a Game of the Year game.
It's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think Rebirth does it. I don't think Rebirth is better than Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's a lot to like, and there's a lot to dislike about this game. I have a list of likes and dislikes.
All right.
But I'm going to start out with the big major difference about Remake to Rebirth, which is the Rebirth takes an open world scheme. So, this is a Japanese dev doing an open world, not really typical of Japanese developers to do open world games. But we have one here. And
was 15 open world? Somewhat? Or
15 is open world. 16 is like linearly open world.
16, sorry. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this open world is different from both those games in it's more Ubisoft-like. There's things around the map, towers, monsters to kill.
Question marks, if you will, right?
Sure,
yeah.
those kind of things. So I really don't like the open world approach. I think the way the game paces itself out through the narrative, the open world kind of just destroys any semblance of pacing with the narrative. I feel like that, you know how when you play open world games and you feel like the game sort of like wants you to do all these things. I feel like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth wants you to do like every little part of it.
Right.
And I don't really know how to explain that other than it's just a feeling that when I'm playing that game, I'm like, yeah, I want to finish this area before I move to the next one.
Right.
Because that's kind of like the game never really is taking me back to any of these areas.
Can you go back, though, if you want?
You can.
Okay, so nothing's like closed off to you after a certain point.
No, but the narrative never takes you back.
Right, okay.
So like the first area is the grasslands. It's right outside a city called Calm. So the game starts off, Rebirth ends and you're leaving Midgar. So
Gotcha.
Midgar is like the first 8 hours of the original game.
I was gonna say, so to establish this is only half of, these are both parts of a game, half of a game, right?
This is like
or a third.
Rebirth is a third of Final Fantasy VII.
All right,
so we're getting one
interesting.
more part.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so Remake is just the first 8 hours of the first game.
Got it.
Put into like, I would say like 60 to 70 hours. And Rebirth is basically like the entire middle of the game. And once you leave Midgar, Final Fantasy VII opens up, and it does the same here, except that it takes like a modern day design approach of it. And I just found that like, you do the same things. You have to, there's towers and they find other things, and then there's these summon locations you have to go to, and there's 3 of them, and then you fight the summon in VR mode, and you get the summon. There's just like a VR simulator, like
Oh, I was gonna say,
combat
yeah.
arena thing.
Got it.
And you fight the summons in there, and then you get to use the summon out in the world. So you're kind of, while you're following the narrative, you know, you're in an open world, and then the narrative will just kind of move you out of that area into the next one. And I just feel the majority of the open world, the pacing of all of it, the majority of the length of the side content, it just seems so unnecessary. All of this open world just doesn't feel like it needs to exist in the way it does. And I know that's the way it exists in the original Final Fantasy VII, so it kind of makes sense why they did that, but it adds so much to the game.
Yet so little, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
And like to the point where I'm like, again, I am doing 20 hours of side content in between story beats that I'm kind of like, I love the story. I love the characters. The narrative isn't the problem here. It's everything in between. And that's the majority of the game. I spent 160 fucking hours in this game. And you can mainline it in 30. In 30 hours. This game has entirely too much going on. There's so many mini games for every fucking thing. There's a card game like Gwent. It's called Queen's Blood. It's really good, but it's really, you can get really into it, and there's a lot of side content around it. There's mini games for like every little fucking thing you can think of.
Right.
Like there's a mini game, some mini games that you only experience once during a side quest. There is chocobo racing. There is tons of different like gambling, fighter mini games, little arcade games in a place called the Gold Saucer. And the Gold Saucer is basically like an amusement park.
Right.
So in the original, there's a ton of mini games there. So that kind of comes back. But it just seems like the minute you think you've done the mini game, they add more. They add like, here's the expert modes now. And it's just like, oh my god, and it doesn't stop. They just keep unlocking more. Like the side content never ends. So I just feel like majority of my game is not spent with this great narrative with these great characters I love. It's experiencing the side content that I know when I beat the game I'm not gonna want to go back and do.
Right.
So I'm doing the majority of it then and there. Like you would tackle probably most open world games.
Right.
Usually when you beat the game, you want to be done with it. And the game doesn't allow you to go back. It's not like, oh, here's the open world, have fun.
Right.
And it makes sense in the narrative. It's like, nope, you're done. Here's chapter select. You can go back through. I don't want to do that right now. What do you think? You know, in terms of open world, like with what I'm saying, does that...
No,
I mean,
it
it probably
sounds-
obviously doesn't sound appealing.
Well, no, it's just, I can tell... It sounds like there's just a lot of kind of, I don't want fluff. Yeah, maybe put in.
There's a huge ton of fluff.
And I think, you know, I get wanting to expand to a degree, absolutely. But if that comes at the expense of having a bit more of a cohesive experience, I don't think that's a good thing. And
Yeah.
I do think you run the risk of overwhelming your player with just too much.
Yeah,
Which, you know, it's
I
a
felt
fine,
so overwhelmed.
like, it's a fine line because, I don't know, I love how much content's in like The Witcher 3 per se,
But
and all but it
the
seems
content
more
in Witcher 3
yeah.
is a really high quality. I feel like every side quest feels really good. Final Fantasy Remake had a problem with side content where it just kind of felt boring and like generic.
And that's, you don't want that.
16 had that
Yeah.
problem. I don't remember during the review.
I do remember you guys
That was like
talking
my
about that.
one big thing
Yeah.
was the side content just sucked. But there wasn't like a ton of it that it was really divesting a huge amount of my time and attention away. Final Fantasy VII Remake, or sorry, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does not respect your time. It kind of asks of everything you have and all of it. Like, you know, I've never heard of anyone playing a game like that where you're truly just mainlining everything.
I mean,
you know?
I think
like
you're
skipping everything you can.
Well,
Like on a first playthrough. Like, I don't really think that's how people play games a lot.
I don't
Like,
know.
they do
I
some
really
of
don't
it.
know. I'm sure that there's normie, like, I know there are people out there who, I mean, you hear story like, just as an example, they get Skyrim, and then it's like, hey, all right, I beat the main quest in Skyrim, I'm done. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I'm done. It's like, no, you're not. It's like, but they're done what they want to be done. You know what I mean? I do think you can, as long as those things aren't taking away from the main story in the way of like you're missing things that are incredibly key, I don't necessarily hate that they're in there, but you do run that risk of then being like, all right, well, I am that person who wants to play all this and I'm finding no real joy, not joy, but like no real reward out of doing
like
this.
you would hit a point and you'd be like, all right, I want to play the fucking game.
Yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
So there's Grasslands, Junon, Corel, Gongaga, Nebel. There's 5 open world areas, and they're all kind of like, here's your desert one, and here's your grasslands. The Junon is sort of like a coastal one. Nebel is also coastal, but a bit different, like mountainous environs. And the environments look good, and they look cool, and I'm interested in them from like an environmental perspective. But by the time I got to the third one, Corel, and after this moment called Costa del Sol, which is kind of like a break point in the game, it's kind of like a vacation town. It's like a bit chill point of the game. It's kind of fun. It's the anime beach episode.
Right.
They go on the beach and then things happen.
Right.
But there's some narrative beats there. But after that, you go back in the open world. It's like, oh my god, I got to do this again.
Yeah.
I got to complete the zone again.
Yeah,
and then there's these ridiculous mini games that are really, there's this like sit up mini game at this gym. And there's this bunch of like macho fucking gym guys that are in the first game, and they make a reappearance here. And the mini game was hard then, but there weren't a ton of them. And instead, I think it's pull-ups in Remake, and in Rebirth it's sit-ups. And this fucking mini game was killing me. And I'm just like, why the fuck is this even here?
Right.
I'm just getting so annoyed, and like, why do I need to do this?
Right.
No reason, really. Other than like completion, and I kind of want to have most things done before I finish the game. And I did finish everything. There's a really long sort of quest that goes through like every area. You have to get these like proto relics, and this character is not in the original game, but he's an iconic Final Fantasy character. His name is Gilgamesh,
right?
Like the historic
Yep.
figure.
Yeah.
And he has a dog named Enkidu. He's just kind of like this goofy, like multiversal character who like wields other iconic weapons from the Final Fantasy series. And he's just kind of goofy, and you fight him. And there is a really, 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 really long quest involving him that goes through all the zones, and I'm just like, oh my god. And right when I thought I was done there's more. And I have to fight like you have to fight like 2 of the summons together to get to him. So it involves all the summons, and then you fight him, and then that was like the last thing I did before I went to the end game, and I'm just like, this is like, it just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It just doesn't stop. Like, can it just stop? And then
did it feel like it was setting it up to stop too? Because like,
it feels like I was like, oh, I'm done.
No, yeah, that's the.
Yep.
Because it's funny, we didn't mention this in our Celebrate review, but there were like 2 bosses where I was like, oh, here's the end. I'm like, oh no, this isn't the end. But then like thinking back, clearly the story was not setting that up for it to be the end. It felt like you were coming to a story conclusion, and you were like, oh, here's the end. And then it was like, oh, we got a bunch more coming. What the fuck, right? Okay.
Yeah. So, and there is a relationship mechanic in this game, and it's in the original, and it's really hidden in the original. It's basically just you get like what's called affinity points from like just talking with characters and doing certain things in the original, and they kind of bring it into a more of like, hey, there's a relationship mechanic if you like say there's like dialogue options in this game,
right?
And, like, I don't really know why, because they all kind of like,
they don't really make a difference,
right? They don't like this whole relationship mechanic doesn't really make a difference in this game at all. And so basically, like, if you're a fan of the original, the gold saucer date is like a big thing for, like, you just go on a date with like whoever character has the max. So you can go on a date with like Barrett, the guy with the big gun arm, and it's funny. Like, and you can do that in this game as well.
Yeah.
But usually people are aiming for Tifa or Aerith.
Right.
And I wanted to do Tifa because canonically, like, Tifa and Cloud are like kind of a thing, so I'm like, I'm cool with that. But I got Aerith somehow, and I was like so pissed off. But like, largely, you think that relationship mechanic, like in a Mass Effect, would kind of have repercussions throughout the story, and like, you know, they would be like seen as your love interest or whatever. Right. But like, realistically, I'm like, when I got to the data mechanic and I finished it, I'm like, this really. And like, yeah, it was just for a cutscene. It's just as goofy as it was in the first game. So why did they ham up the mechanic and tell you all about it when it like really amounts to a scene and nothing else?
Yeah,
because like we've talked about this before, about Aerith dying,
Right.
Her being like her death in the original Final Fantasy VII being like one of the biggest known video game deaths ever.
Right.
She does die in this game.
Oh.
So-
Earlier than you would have expected? Or
No,
okay.
it happens a
At the
similar
appropriate
way,
time, yeah.
But like there are a lot of the game, you know, as a player playing this game, I'm kind of like, you know, are they gonna kill her? And I was telling you about that. I'm like, are they going to like again? This is it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet have to die at the end.
Right.
That's like the whole point.
Yeah, that's one of
And
the
Aerith dying is like a Romeo and Juliet moment where like she has to die.
It's a canon event.
Yeah, like and we get there, but like dating her and stuff, and then there's a scene before the date that kind of like really cemented to me. There's like a musical performance, and she like sings, and you kind of like reenact this play, and like the song she sings, I'm just like, she's so fucking dead. I was like, it really hit me in that moment, and it's been in the trailer, so it wasn't something that like I'm seeing and hearing it for the first time.
Sure.
But I'm sitting and watching her like perform the song, and I'm like, she is so fucking dead. I like can't even. There's no way she lives. None.
What, you thought there was a chance they would not kill her?
Yeah, I did because
okay.
so at the end of Remake, you kind of find out that Sephiroth seems to be he's appearing in places he didn't appear in the original. He's acting very omniscient, like he knows something. So when you get to the end, like you're leaving Midgar, and there's these black spirits that kind of have been like throughout the game. They've stopped characters from dying. They've intervened in places, taking people away. Like they seem to be making certain events happen. And you get to the end of Remake, and it kind of culminates with they stop you and you fight like what are called the Arbiters of Fate, and these like big like spirits essentially that sort of like embody like destiny.
Right.
And then you fight Sephiroth in person, which you don't fight him looking like that a lot. You usually fight him as in like he's like a mutant. Like he basically has like phases.
Sure.
And he doesn't look like a normal person in those phases.
Makes sense.
And so Sephiroth kind of tells Cloud, like one of the lines he said, he's like, you don't know like what's gonna happen here. And he like you fight him like you do at like the end of the original game, and he says 7 seconds till the end, time enough for you perhaps, but what will you do with it? Let us see. So it seems like he knows like what's gonna happen, or like he's seen this, or he's been through it, and like he doesn't act like this in the original game. So you're going into Rebirth of being like, what is going on?
It's almost like maybe he's reliving the event. Like
exactly. Like he's been through this. He know he
like
loses.
That's how this could be the continuation in the way. Like this is a
Right,
new universe.
right.
Yeah.
And it's a game that is aware that like Final Fantasy VII exists, and that's not necessarily what ends up happening. What ends up happening with the story is we start off the game playing as a character who Cloud is essentially pretending to be his friend Zack, who is actually a soldier, first class. And Cloud is essentially traumatized into not remembering things correctly. This is in the original and this game, and you playing as Zack after he's dead. Also, at the end of Remake, you see that Zack is alive somehow.
Oh, interesting.
And in a different universe, like carrying Cloud into Midgard. Zack dies there, so like Cloud like goes into Midgard like on his own. So like this is already like something's happening.
Right.
And so like you start off the game playing as Zack when he's supposed to be dead. So and you keep going back. They're like the interstitial moments.
Right.
It's not like a ton of gameplay, but you're playing as Zack. You're seeing stuff. A character, Biggs, who also died in the first game, is there too. How are these people there? Cloud and Aerith are there, unconscious for some reason. All the other main characters from the cast, Red 13, Barrett, Tifa, a few other people, they're dead for some reason. And you find out that there's a multiverse going on here where different things are happening. And sometimes like fate, like Zack just dies later at something, or like, you know, things are just going differently. And you find out like basically like at the end, rushing to the end, like Zack from that universe like comes to help Cloud, and they kind of like, they don't get like a moment, but they fight together. So it's not like the end of the game where they have this like, you know, even with Aerith dates Zack before he dies. And Cloud, like Aerith asks Cloud in the first game if she knows who Zack is, or if he knows who Zack is, and he acts like he doesn't. He does, and he's also pretending to be him self-consciously, like he's like a mess. This has a lot to do with like his experiment. He gets taken from a facility and infused with Sephiroth cells, and that's why he's like he hallucinates him all the time.
Interesting. Okay.
Sephiroth is in his head in Rebirth, being like, "Don't trust Tifa. Don't trust her. Like, trust me.
Right.
Reunion. We got to be together." And like, you don't know, and this happens in the original game where Sephiroth is sort of like just telling Cloud that like everything he's doing is wrong and he's getting in his head. And it gets to a point where he kind of like has like a psychotic break and he's like tries to kill Tifa a few times and he's like sort of like helping Sephiroth. Anyway, yeah, so the end of the game is like sort of like this multiversal sort of moment. And Aerith is sort of praying like she does, and like, so in the original, like, she's praying at this temple. She's an ancient, so she's like the last of like an ancient race of people who were on the planet, very powerful, magical, gone.
Got it.
She's the last of the race. So she's praying at this temple, and like, she's like trying to commune with them to figure out how do we stop Sephiroth. So not only does Sephiroth wants to destroy the world, he wants to destroy all of these worlds. So he knows they exist, and he knows that he can essentially, he has the ability to basically like conquer them. That's what he wants to do.
Interesting.
For his mom, Genova.
I see.
Who is an alien.
Okay.
who
he I did not expect that.
He was born from a combination of her cells and like an actual birth. So that's why he's like powerful, and he's better than all the other soldiers because he's infused with this DNA. He finds that out. He goes nuts. He destroys Nibelheim, which is the town Cloud and Tifa are from. You play that moment as the tutorial of the game. So you play as like, as Cloud sees it, he is with Sephiroth going through Nibelheim, but it's not actually him. He's there as like a foot soldier with a helmet on, so nobody knows it's him. Nobody knows he's back. And Zack is the actual soldier that's going along with Sephiroth. And he tells the story, and like Tifa's there when it originally happened. She's like listening to him and like, this is not how this goes. And and Tifa's like talking with Aerith. You don't really see this in the original. And they're talking about basically like, I was there. That didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
And that's really cool. Like, unlike the original, they're kind of like giving you these interstitials of like, yeah, the character, like, why doesn't Tifa actually ever say anything about like those events not happening the way Cloud says they do? And they kind of explain it as like Tifa's just kind of letting him like, she knows something's wrong with him,
but she's giving him a space or whatever.
She's like letting him like do his
figure
shit.
it out. Yeah.
And she has like this scar on her chest from Sephiroth like slashing her, and she like shows him, and he doesn't doubt her, but like he's clearly being influenced by Sephiroth. Anyway, I'm kind of going on and on about the story to say it's awesome. I do really like the story.
I was going to say, it sounds like the story doesn't seem to be the issue.
No,
like the
it's
main
not.
quest, it just seems like the fluff and the like these needless additions, maybe you could call them, are really kind of interfering with the stuff that you were thoroughly enjoying.
Right.
In the game.
And I think what Remake did and how it did it and how it paced its story and how it introduced side stuff was fine.
Right.
But in this, it just feels like it's like it's like triple times the side stuff.
That is
wild. And they're getting in the main, like, I do like
maybe cut that in half and make
I
it
do
more
an hour
better,
or two of story, and then I'm with 20 hours of side content.
Right.
Like, that's really what it feels like. Again, like, I remember Gene, when they were reviewing it, he's like, oh, he mainlined the game and beat it in 30 hours. I'm like, that's crazy. I'm like, that you can actually finish the game, like, pretty quickly if you just kind of go through it.
And like that's the thing, and I guess like I don't know, I don't begrudge the game then if you can finish it in 30 hours if you would like to.
But
and
don't you find that like those goalposts just weirdly like
weirdly too large? You would expect it to be more like I wonder what
100 to 50, 150, not 30 to 160. That's a big margin.
I'd be curious to look up a comparable game like a Witcher. Like how long does it take for me to just beat the needed things to get through Witcher?
But you know what's funny?
I'm sure I actually
nobody talked about the Witcher like that.
No, for sure. But I think people have talked about more like your Skyrims and even your Fallouts like that, to where like, yeah, if you want to just go in and just do your main quest and go through, go for it. But I don't know. I would be curious to look up what that discrepancy is in most open world games. Because, for something like Skyrim, the main quest, or even like Fallout, if you just did the main quest of that, I'm sure it would only take you a day to 2 days, maybe. And then I have 3 hours in that, or 3 days and 3 days and a half in that game right now. So you know what I mean? So like, does that mean that's not good? But I guess also I think Final Fantasy seems to be much more story-oriented.
It is
comparatively. So
Yeah.
I can see where that gripe would come in for sure.
I want just finishing the point about Aerith because I was talking about how she was praying.
Right.
So Cloud like blocks Sephiroth's attack from killing her, and then like he's like off to the side, and then for some reason like he just still still kills her.
Right.
And it's clearly like he blocks the attack, it's done. But then, like, you hear, like, this, like, fling noise, and then he still, like, comes down and, like, kills her.
Right.
So, like, even though he stopped it in, like, he, like, made, like, another multiverses reality, like, become the reality here. And there's these wisps are still around. There's a lot of, like, cosmic forces with the wisps, and there's these weapons that they call weapons that they're basically, like, monsters that the planet is like creating to fight for it, because like Sephiroth is like essentially stealing the planet's like life force. Shinra is doing that. The Final Fantasy is a big game about like environmentalism and like how the Shinra, the electric power company, is siphoning the world's energy to make life a better place, but you're killing the world at the same time.
Right.
But Sephiroth is now also like using the planet's energy to like destroy it.
Oh, it's global warming. I get it.
There's a lot of like environmentalism in the original and this. So what you kind of get to this moment of like, holy shit, is Aerith gonna die? It's a big buildup, and she still does.
Oh, that's good.
You fight with her and stuff, and you get to the end of the game, and she's like, Cloud is like talking to her as like a ghost. I'm like, oh, they're doing that. She's dead, but Cloud's gonna talk to her in the next game still.
Makes sense.
So there's still like, she's not gonna be a playable character, but he's gonna like hallucinate her, and he's like talking to her, and like Cloud seems like absolutely like weirdly psychotic, he's not in a good state, and he has like another few like mental hurdles to get through in the original. So
real quick for the comparable, I just looked up how long to beat Witcher 3.
Okay.
How long do you think it takes to just beat the main story?
60 hours.
You're not too far off. 51 and a half hours. And then the main story and sides, how long do you think?
180.
No, so completionist is 173. Main story plus side quests 103. So that breakup does make a bit more sense to me, where it's like, all right, you get a good 50 hours, but then you have another 50 hours of content possibly to go through.
And I don't think a ton of people beat this game.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm
like very much teetering on the idea of going back to the first one and then trying this
I
out.
want to talk about this at the end. I know I'm like kind of spoiling it for you, but I'm really not.
All this isn't registering to the point where I'm gonna remember, have cognizance of it.
Yeah.
Like gameplay wise, I'm understanding, but like names and things, like they are definitely kind of flying over.
Really quickly, I'm trying to look at trophies. I want to see what the completion rate for finishing the game is, finishing the last chapter. If it tells me here, please tell me the percentage. 36% of people who played Rebirth beat it. That's low.
I think for an open world game of that size, I think that's probably actually pretty accurate.
Okay.
Because like, I'm trying to think. I remember.
I'm gonna look at Stellar Blade while you're talking.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Just to get a comparison.
I did well, but see, I think that's a tougher comparison because that's
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, I'm trying to think of like a more specific one that you could look up that's like more RPG heavy. I don't know. Look up The Witcher, even on there. Like
I'm the Raven fight from Stellar Blade. 39 people beat it, so I assume
39%.
Yeah, that's like the last fight before the last fight. Right. So you would assume anyone who's
beaten that, you would hope, would do the one more. Right. Which is that's one thing I do love about trophies. So I don't know. I don't think that's probably too off completion wise.
Baldur's Gate 3, that's a better one.
Oh, but see, sure. But even that's still.
But it's so funny that like I'll talk about Baldur's Gate and like we reviewed that, and not one point during Baldur's Gate that I go, wow, the side stuff way too much.
Right. And I do think that speaks to the quality of the side content. You know what I mean, for sure. And that makes the most sense to me in the way of you don't want this fluff that you feel like you're just kind of doing to do, but you want it to mean something to a degree. And it's annoying when you're just getting these bullshit quests to just go fetch things or something like that. Or there's not really even any story involved. Because like you were saying, even with The Witcher, like especially those Witcher contracts, they're very in depth.
So there's an achievement for literally just beating the game, 18%.
And that's on what?
PS5.
This is for, I'm sorry, which game again? I apologize.
Baldur's Gate 3.
See, I mean
that's low.
That's low, but and again,
I mean it's a lot lower than 39 and 36.
What's see again? There are certain like games like even if you did look up a Skyrim, like you can beat the main quest in that, but not put in 100 and odd hours. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. I think that is an interesting statistic, but I don't think it's too far off from like what we normally see on games.
Yeah, so like I was saying, I love the characters, I love the story, I love the world, I love the narrative. That's not I think a surprise at this point. But the game does have some performance issues. It doesn't run super well on the PS5.
Is it like when you're in cities and stuff, or is it kind of pretty constant?
No, it's constant. It's constant in 30. I played it in 30.
Okay.
But it doesn't, like, I heard it wasn't constant in the 60. That's why I didn't play it. So I watched the Digital Foundry thing, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's super stable.
So,
and it doesn't, it looks pretty, but I don't know.
Not blowing you away.
Nah, like, it was, I don't know. Yes. Yeah.
You seem, what's the word?
I feel like it could have just ran better.
Right.
You know?
But did you feel like it was really interfering with like your overall gameplay loop? Okay.
No.
Well, that's good. Jesus.
I was talking about everything's falling.
Sorry.
We're both hitting this table.
Yeah, it's not much.
Nah, you're okay.
Sorry.
No, you're right.
At least it wasn't on the table.
Yeah.
And that's why we close the cap, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot going on in this for sure.
There is a ton going on in it. I mentioned before I didn't like the relationship and the date mechanic. It just ended up feeling empty. It didn't feel like increasing my relationship stat, which just essentially happened through the very few dialogue options there are and some moments in game. Like during the Casa del Sol part, like you have to like get bathing suits, and if like everyone there's like two for Tifa, Aerith, and Cloud. There's two for each of them, and if you don't match them, you don't get like the relationship points. And it's like, and like those are the like there's a few choices that like really spin you one way or the other. And I matched like Aerith and not Tifa, and I was like, oh my god, like you fucking
motherfucker.
I didn't really love the Nibelheim intro, which like I was telling you was that flashback that like is the tutorial for the game. The opening bombing mission from the first game is much better, and it sucks that like for this game that it has to like live up to like what it did before.
Sure.
And I mean, I think that's like a big problem with we've seen a lot of sequels to Game of the Years that just don't quite live up to it. Well, I don't necessarily think Zelda's an example, but like it's like, okay, we saw what the game did before. Is it better than what came before?
Well,
and it's like Final Fantasy VII Remake was so impactful and so different, but now we have the next one and it's not hitting as hard or
exactly. And I think
similar.
that's like that's the nature of the beast when it comes to sequels. And I mean, like God of War, for instance, that came back and was just such a new and different perspective on that series that it's tough to then do. You don't want to do that almost a second time. You want to keep it squarely within what you've kind of created. So no, I think, that's just a sequel problem things will run into when they're creating their sequels. So it makes sense to me for sure.
There were two characters called Chadley and Mai, and remember I was talking about that VR thing. Right. They're basically kind of like your characters who like mark world completion and are about that. They fall into that, and they're just kind of annoying characters. Right. Didn't really enjoy them at all. There are two characters who are introduced in this game that complete the Final Fantasy VII party, and that's Vincent Valentine and Sid Highwind. And they're like Red 13, who's the dog character.
Right.
It gets introduced at the end of Remake, but not playable. So Vincent and Sid are the same things are here, introduced in the party, but not playable yet.
Right.
So they'll be playable in the next one. I mean, but we're also losing Aerith.
I see.
So they kind of, one comes out, two come in.
I see.
So Vincent Valentine is like a typical, like kind of like emo boy kind of character. He's like tall. He wears a lot of black and red, black hair, deep voice.
Right.
Cool. Loved him.
Mysterious.
Sid Sid Highwind is your Sid is a recurring character in every Final Fantasy. There's a Sid in every one for the most part. I think from like 2 on.
I see.
So Sid is he operates the airship. You get a ship that takes you from you have to like fly across continents and shit. Sid is the guy who does that, and he comes in. So he flies you around, and then your airship gets damaged and becomes a boat for a little while. So you get to like, oh, here's the mini game, driving around the boat. Why? Okay, fine. Because like in early Final Fantasies, you go from like simple boat to bigger boat that can cross different kinds of terrain.
Right.
And then you can go on the land, and there's an airship. So they're kind of like fulfilling that moment from the first game. There's a buggy you can drive around this one area where chocobos can't, and I think it's like a sand buggy.
I see.
And you get to explore one of the areas around it, which is fine. And then basically it's like, oh, it's like too hot for the chocobos to handle, so you need a car.
You got a car. Why don't they just use cars all the time? Okay, fair enough. I didn't know if there was a reason.
I don't know.
I mean, chocobos are fun.
And so Sid is in the original. He has a pack of cigarettes he has like a headband, and there's a pack of cigarettes in his headband. He's kind of a piece of shit. He like beats his wife. He like calls her a bitch in the first one. Not very nice guy to his wife. He's kind of like, I'm the the airship guy. Like, I'm Sid, and fuck that. Like he's that kind of character.
Right.
And in this one, he's like very nice. And I'm just like, is he gonna like still call his wife a bitch in this when we get to that part, like, and be like really shitty to like his wife? Like, is that gonna be a thing? Because they took like the cigarettes like out of his new model, and I'm like, interesting. I'm like, yeah, and so I was kind of annoyed that it just seemed a bit off of what the character's supposed to be.
Yeah.
He's not like he is a piece of shit, but like he becomes.
They don't want to lean. Yeah, of course you can't. God forbid.
You can't abuse women.
God forbid there's a character that's just a piece of shit these days.
I don't think let me take that back. I don't think he hits her. I think there's like implied that he's just kind of like
abusive in some way.
Abuser,
yeah.
And he's like down on his luck. He used to be like work for Shinra, and he was going to go to space. They canceled the space program.
Right.
And he lives in a town called Rocket Town, where like they build a town around the space program, and the old rocket is still there, and he still works on it. And he's just kind of like. And we haven't gotten this backstory in Rebirth yet, so we're gonna get there in the next game. But it's just kind of like, yeah, he's like down on his luck. He's like, he just like doesn't really. He's not doing what he wants to do, so he turns into a piece of shit. That's kind of the idea with it. So I was just kind of like, there were no hints of that. He just seemed really nice. He was like, oh, I want to help Aerith.
Right.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah, what? Why?
Like, you're not like what? And he's like, oh, like he knew Alfana, like he knew her mom before she died. And I don't think that was in the original. I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Why not?
Anyway, let's talk about the gameplay.
Yeah, please.
A little bit more.
So I know that's one thing that definitely was interesting to me. I remember when playing the Rebirth, or what's the first one? Final Fantasy VII
Remake.
It is Remake.
Yeah, you played the demo, right?
Yeah, and I was like, this is interesting combat. Not necessarily for me. Is it still the same idea, I assume?
Yeah, so one of the great parts from Rebirth to Remake is they really fine-tuned the combat overall. So Cloud was a character who couldn't attack enemies in the air. Now, if you dodge once, you get the ability to like shoot I don't know, slice at enemies with like air magic and like hit enemies in the air. The dodging, all the mechanics for all the characters just feel way more tweaked and way better. This game does something I really love in games, and especially in games with big parties. You have a party of 3, and then like you have the reserves.
Right.
But everyone in your party is actually on the field of combat.
Interesting.
So if you're with Red 13, Cloud, and Yuffie, Tifa, Aerith, and Barrett will be on towards the outskirts of the fight, contributing.
Interesting.
And they're still there.
Huh.
And I love that. Because cool. I just think it's like, I hate when I have a party and I got to switch between people. And like me, I like to see everything. So I'm like constantly switching people in and out, just making sure everyone kind of gets their time in the spotlight, using different party combinations and stuff like that.
Classic Guccism.
Yeah. So, I was using a lot of my party members, but everyone gains XP when you kill anything. So you can really just use one party if you want to.
Right.
In the ending, you do use everybody, so I feel like if you decided to not do that, like if for some reason there's a later character named Kate Sith, he's a little robot Moogle character, and he looks kind of weird, but he's like a little cat on like a big Moogle doll he rides around.
Oh shit!
He's literally a robot.
Right.
There's somebody controlling him, but you don't know who that is. The characters don't know who that is. In the game, you find out. Not a super huge spoiler,
Right.
but I won't say it.
No.
And his combat is interesting. So he starts out like Kate's is just walking around, and you can hit people, and then once you get your ability up, you can mount the Moogle, and then you're more powerful. And you find him at the Gold Saucer, so he has a lot of like gambling mechanics to him. He's like a fortune teller, like bot. That's his job. So a lot of his skills revolve around luck and gambling, and can use this like gamble where it's like you roll the dice, and then this is what you get when you get the thing. So if you don't like that, you don't necessarily have to use that, but in the end game, like you're kind of forced to use like certain character parties because like 3 of them are fighting this, and then the other 3 are doing this. So it won't kill you if you don't do that. Like, I don't know. I hate when I hear people, it's like, oh yeah, like, I think we're in like Baldur's Gate when it's like, you never use Gale, not once. Like, you never just.
I never used Gale.
That was
me. Yeah, it was probably me. Yeah. I was like, nah, I don't like him. Fuck him.
Yeah. So I love what they've done for the combat. The gameplay isn't the issue here. The story isn't the issue here. It's the game design. It's the open world
design.
approach.
Yeah. But all the story stuff feels great. You're saying you love it, like all the story beats and stuff.
It feels like it's ending a bit differently than I thought it was going to be, or like what's happening with this like Final Fantasy VII multiverse thing. Other than like, I kind of thought it was like, oh, like Sephiroth is like he's done this before, and like that this story has to happen this way, and that's still kind of true to a certain point. But it looks like, different things can happen at different times, and that's kind of what like. There's one point that where like Aerith looks like she's gonna die, or like another character's gonna die, and they don't. And it's like, oh, like the fake out of it, and like to kind of like keep you on your toes a little bit. But again, Aerith's death was so big that it was like. They either really have to not do it hardcore and give like very good reasons why, or they have to do it,
That makes sense.
Again, it's like Romeo and Juliet. They have to die at the end.
Interesting.
A few more points. So the materia system, I don't remember that returns.
Not really.
There's a lot of materia. It's basically you slot in your abilities, whether it be fire, healing magic, you can do HP up, different kind of things that slot into the different mechanics, and your weapons and your armor affect how many slots you have, and the more you level up, the more the end gear
making sense.
Has more slots. So they add a lot of abilities to the game, a lot of different combinations, and that's great. It sucks there's no loadout, because there's nothing worse than when you're up against a boss and you really need to reconfigure your system or your materia and like what you're doing, but you can't go back to what you had.
Right.
So I really think there could have been a QOL where it's like, okay, this is loadout 1, and you can switch loadouts, so you can swap back and forth instead of like, all right, what did I have? And like you have like almost 100 different materia, so it's like, what did I have? Like, I got to take a picture of this just to remember.
Right.
So that kind of thing. And leading into that, there's a new system called the Folio system, and it's kind of like each character's progression. They get like certain abilities, and I think that system adds too many abilities. I feel like every character has so much going on and can have so much going on with the materia system. Like, I can have my character have fire, thunder, arrow, heal, breach, protect, like if I want to, and they just have so many abilities, and they already have so many abilities on top of it with their character, and through leveling different weapons and stuff like that. And so I just kind of got to a point where I'm like, is all this really necessary? Like, I know it's
overly
up to my
complicated,
choice, but like,
yeah,
because the Folio system, you won't max it out, so you have to like pick and choose. And there's some abilities that basically they introduced new abilities that give you, in case you don't have fire or an elemental weakness, they give you a physical weapon ability that has an elemental weakness. So in case you don't have magic, you can still counter stuff like that. Right. And I'm just like, this feels like wholly unnecessary. Like they don't do that much damage. Like I wasn't using these abilities like a lot. And if you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. And I doubt you use them that much either. Like they're just like better abilities to use. But like, I just felt like some characters like I had a groove with, and other characters I was like, I don't even use half these abilities. And it's like it's like there's so much going on here. It's just like too much. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm at with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's just a game with too much. There's too much going on. Like some of it needed to get hit on the cutting room floor, and I don't think the next game is going to be an open world game. I hope it goes back to being the linear thing. I think that worked well. And here's another thing, Trio. Just like with everything with Square, this didn't hit their projections. I don't know what Square is doing. It seems like every game they release never hits
the projections.
Every time they talk about it, like like nothing hits their expectations. So I think they're out of whack for a little bit. But yeah, it just seems from like everything that we've heard, it seems like Rebirth didn't sell well.
Right.
And I really don't know what that means. Because this is a very critically acclaimed game. It reviewed fairly well. A lot of people.
Did the first one sell very well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it won Game of the Year.
Oh, right.
And it was a lot of people love these characters and stuff. Everyone loves Sephiroth and Cloud and Tifa, and we want to have the waifu wars, Tifa or Aerith. I personally say Tifa if you were asking me.
Okay, if there's a gun to the head. Yeah. That's so funny.
But yeah, I'm like, so why was it a failure?
Yeah.
It seemed like it reviewed pretty well and it sold pretty well, but like, and I also did like, even for like Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't get spoiled, considering how long it took me to finish both those games.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, did a lot of people actually finish it? That was really my question.
I didn't.
And sort of my, right.
Yeah.
With Baldur's Gate and Rebirth, I kind of like came to a conclusion that I was like, maybe a lot more people than I thought just don't finish it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a possibility.
And that's why there's not a lot of people like just blathering the end. I didn't know Aerith died until I got there. That's a big, easy Aerith dies in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Right.
You're
surprised you don't see that anywhere. Yeah.
Right. I didn't get spoiled at all.
That is interesting.
So yeah. I mean, of course we're gonna get the final part to this this 7 remake here, and I would love. I know we've talked. I forget what podcast we were talking about this on, but I would love for you to play the original. And then whenever you want, get a remake and Rebirth.
I think there's a strong possibility I'm going to do it because they look fun. They look interesting. We have some time.
We do a re3 on. I would love to play the OG again, especially if it's before like the final part comes out. It's been I played the original in 2020, like at the beginning of COVID before Remake came out. So I would love to play it again on Xbox, get all the achievements again, and kind of play it again if we decide to do that. But
I would love that too. Actually, we still have to figure out our next re3. But
yeah,
no, that sounds like a great possibility to me at the very least. But anything else, Gooch?
No, and I didn't think. Yeah, like I think by the time you roll around to Rebirth, you'll probably remember
some of this. Yeah, but
you'll probably remember like that I didn't love it, but.
Right.
Again, like you're not the same gamer as me.
I'm not that guy.
You're not gonna peg all the side content down and do it. You're gonna do what you want, and you're gonna play it.
Right.
Probably at a better place, but it's funny. Like when completing this game, it kind of like ruined the experience for me.
That sucks.
And I was saying it a little bit with Dragon's Dogma 2, and it's like completing this game is not the way to play it.
Yeah.
It's truly just not made to be played that way. And we've been in these situations before where we've talked about me completing a game, like Dishonored 2, like famously is like the one where I really realized I'm like me trying to like do the no kill, no detection,
hard, like try and get everything in as much. Yeah, like you're thinking of it from that achievement angle or like those certain angles before the actual game. Right. But no, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think Rebirth might get a Game of the Year nom, but it doesn't have my vote this year. And I think this year is going to be a pretty weakish year. We know we're not getting anything from, actually, no, that's not true. We are getting some games from Xbox, but nothing like a a huge
Right.
nuke drop of a game. But PlayStation is non-existent this year. We're gonna get Astrobot later in the year, we learned, but like that's not gonna be a game.
No,
of
it's
the
not.
year
It's
game.
not like a Spider-Man. Or anything.
Yeah, so game of the year this year will be pretty interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Rebirth, but like I hope it doesn't win because I truly don't think it is better than Remake.
Yeah, I'd be curious what else would take that top spot. But I'm with you, Gooch. I'm curious to see what kind of comes down the pike here.
Yeah, like wouldn't it be wild if either Stellar Blade or Dragon's Dogma 2 got up there? I mean, I think they're both good games, but game of the year, I don't know.
It's just it's my game of the year so far, and that of it's my favorite game I think I've played so far. But
Stellar
like,
Blade?
is it? I think so. Of like my new, I'm trying to think of what other new games have come out so far this year. That's really been kind of the main one. So yeah, I agree with you though, Gooch. It's not like
will the Elden Ring DLC become a game and be nominated for game of the year?
I don't know,
I don't know.
best updating game or whatever. God, I don't know whatever that was. Gooch, anything else?
No. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy, no, as I continue to talk. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII, you haven't gotten this, I don't know what you're waiting for. If you're a fan, you definitely got to play it. But yeah, just be conscious of your time and how much you really want to spend doing everything.
Absolutely.
I think that will
Very much
enhance or
detract
from your experience.
1000%. Good stuff, Gooch. Well,
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I know this was like a heavier game to review alone. Some of them are easier than others.
it's
so-
all right. I feel bad just making you talk so much because then I'm like, it's more. I try to, we try to ask questions. We do what we can.
And that's why we were trying to get a guest for this.
Yeah.
Like me and you could have just done Dragon's Dogma 2 realistically, but Andre is such a fan of the game.
Absolutely.
We had to get him
No,
on.
that made sense.
Stellar
That made
Blade,
so much sense to me.
We both played, but
Yeah.
when what did we recently review that you didn't play that I played?
Was it? Banishers.
Yeah, and that's like easy to talk about. Like Final Fantasy VII is a big game with a big name.
Lots to cover.
Yeah, lots to
sure.
cover. So that's why we try to bring on guests sometimes, and it just didn't happen because of really just scheduling
Absolutely.
between me, actually.
No, it's hey,
For me,
we can only do what
I'm
we
going.
can do.
I'm going away next weekend. Well, actually, I'll be back. As of recording this, the weekend this comes out, that past weekend I would have been gone. Lots going on in life, but we next podcast, by the time this comes out, is probably going to be Stellar Blade. But yeah, the next podcast we record will be our Summer Games Fest coverage. So we're going to be starting from the state of play and moving through not all of the stuff, but a majority of the stuff, or I guess the big stuff. Not a majority
Indubitably.
of the
Yeah.
stuff.
No, absolutely. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm excited. All right. Well,
Play us out.
to play us out. Okay.
As I've been
I don't
saying
know what
today,
that means.
play us
to
out.
play us out. No, guys, girls, everyone, thank you all so much for being here with us live on twitch.tv/Delco Nerd Network. We really appreciate your time and attention. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. Just search Delco Nerd Network on the platform of your choice. We're on all your favorite social media pages as well. Everywhere with an @ we are at Delco Nerds. We got a Facebook page. We got a Discord channel. All that good stuff will be linked down below. Oh my God. We're getting on the end here and my mouth is just turning to mush.
Yeah.
You can find all this information on our website, delconerdnetwork.com. You can email us your comments, questions, or concerns to delconerds@gmail.com. We're happy to get back to you. But for Gooch, I've been Trio. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay nerdy, and we will see you next time.